Hey everyone, James here and welcome back to TCG R&D, and today we're looking at Design 101, the structure of fun. So this was an article made in May the 29th of 2015. So it's a bit of an old one, but you know, I think it's a little bit of a hidden gem. So let's see. I'm just gonna skip to the pitch here. So the pitch: you are a director in Hollywood. You're sitting in an office one day when a major film executive walks in. "I've got a great idea," he says. "You know Star Wars, A New Hope? We've done some dial testing and the results show that the final attack on the Death Star is the most exciting part. Imagine how great that movie would be if it was a giant climax. What if we throw out all the other stuff and just open the film as the X-Wings are taking off?" Okay, this is going to be a rough meeting. So I like this. So it's addressing the problem here. So the human experience is built out of a sequence of events. When someone tells you what happened to them over the weekend, they describe the events they experienced. "I went hiking in the dunes and then I accidentally took the longer trail. I'd only brought one bottle of water, so I quickly ran out. It took me almost 5 hours to realize what had happened and find my way back to the road. Remind me never to sign up for real adventure. I wouldn't last a day." So the same goes for games, and of course stories. If stories are adventures we experience vicariously through other characters. Games are just adventures that we experience ourselves. Stories in games are built out of series of events that work together to create an overall experience. We call this event structure. Right, so I mean, if people are out there and they're thinking, "All right, I'm going to design a game and then right from the get-go I'm going to be able to do this, and this, and it's going to be really great and stuff," you haven't built up. You know, a horror movie doesn't kick off with the with the creature being revealed. You have to build the suspense for the creature to slowly come in, and then normally halfway through, maybe beyond that, we see the creature. It's finally revealed. You see what it is in all of its horror, and it's been worth it for the journey because right now it's just been moving in the shadows. We don't know about it yet. So you start explaining to the well-meaning executives that the climax only works because of what leads up to it. Every moment of the movie has been building towards this grand confrontation. Aside from the lack of emotional investment, opening with the climactic battle would make every fight that followed feel smaller by comparison. It doesn't make for a feel-good event structure. Okay, he says sourly, then what makes a good event structure? So here's a diagram, and I thought it was nice that they put like a little diagram in because we like visual representation as people. We like that. So the whole idea is that we can build up a little bit and then lower ourselves down, build up a bit more, and then the drop hits, and then build up even higher, and then the big drop, and then the final climactic event that makes it all worth it. That's basically what he sums up in this part. Now remember, this article that I'm reading, there is a link in the description below if you want to read the full thing. I'm just trying to bring out the highlights and just bring it to your attention because I've read through it. I thought it was a really good read, and I definitely think it's worth checking out. Now I've been doing quite a few of these recently, so if you're new to this and you haven't seen this format before, I do have a series. It's TCG R&D, and I will be bringing out more like this. So if you haven't, hit the subscribe button as well because it really helps me out. So I do appreciate that. Thank you. So yes, I think he puts it in good words anyway. So this is what a good game looks like. Each peak and valley represents different events. An upward slope is a positive event and a downward slope is a negative event. You'll notice that the magnitude of the changes between positive and negative keep rising. Yes, so this is what they're saying. This is what we need to basically implement into our own games. So if you are designing a TCG or a board game or a video game or anything like that, you want to build up a little bit, drop down, build up again, drop down, build it up again. And then making it feel organic is always a challenge as well, because you want that organic feel. But it does have to be by design, unfortunately, getting that build up and then drawback, build up and drawback. This is how we get the stories of like the underdog, the comeback, and the coming away defeated, lick the wounds, and then fight the final boss again. It's what we want. This probably seems oddly specific. How can good games be narrowed down into such an arbitrary structure? Because it's not arbitrary at all. The reason you alternate positive and negative events is because human beings quickly adapt to new norms. So this is true. We get comfortable very quickly. If you get a pay rise at work, guess what? That money's already spent. You're used to it. That is now your base. That is your lifestyle. You want the next pay rise now. If you watch a really good movie with good graphics, you want the next year's movie, the movie with the better graphics. And if you play a game, you want the game with the better graphics. You want the upgrade. You go out and you buy the new graphics card, that's the word, and then you put that in just so you can play these new games. Okay, so I should emphasize that a game can start with either positive or negative event as long as it keeps alternating. Your event structure's ending ultimately determines what type of experience this is. A positive ending represents an ultimate triumph, and an ending on a negative event would form a tragedy. So I mean, if you think about this in the form of a TCG, okay, it's turn-based. When you play your turn, it's a positive event. When your opponent plays their turn and attacks you, it's detrimental to you. It is a negative event. So right there, without even implementing anything, you probably have the correct structure in place to mimic this sort of graph. You know, now we just need the ramp up effect to work with you within your TCG, like with Hearthstone, where you gain an extra mana every turn. So on turn 10 you have 10 mana to spend. Now I'm going to spend something really big. Oh, and then I'm right up here. That's exciting, you know. That's the finishing move, where you couldn't do that at the start because you had 1 mana to spend, and then your opponent beat you up, and then you had 2-3 mana to spend, and then your opponent beats you up, and then you got 4, 5, 6 mana to spend, your opponent beats you up, and then 7, 8, 9, 10 mana to spend, and then it builds up right at the end. It's very exciting. Oh, and they use Hearthstone as an example. Maybe that's why I'm thinking of it off the top of my head. Whoopsie. So because we've already used Hearthstone as an example, they've got some other examples here. I want to go through these as well, just so you get a better understanding. You get a broader range of what you're actually focusing on here. So StarCraft has a similar sense of progression, like with the mana system. As you build up over the course of the game, you create larger units to engage in escalating battles until the game ends in a climactic assault. Because in StarCraft, you have to start off, you have to start gathering the resources before you can start inflicting some real pain. So in League of Legends, players gain levels to increase their capabilities. Yes, because they're farming mobs in each lane. If they can get a hero kill, that's a nice big bonus as well. Go back to the start, cash in, get those upgrades, and then come back out again. And then you start getting a more powerful character in which you can go for the end goal, which is destroying your opponent's core. In Super Smash Bros, the more damage you take, the further each hit makes you fly. Each impact feels larger than the last until you're finally blasted off the screen. That is always very scary. I remember playing Smash Bros when it first came out. And of course, yes, you're flying off the screen, and sometimes you think you just weren't going to make it, and you could just jump back onto the ledge. But normally, when you're that badly damaged, when you're above the 100% and you start to see that little health gauge, essentially, I know it's a percentage, that little health percentage, I'll say, and when that starts getting redder and redder and redder, God, it feels impactful. The thrill of it, they've masterclassed that into the scary. You know, if anything was to be a non-deliberate horror game, I'd say it's that Smash Bros percentage health gauge. And then, of course, Portal. Now, I think Portals is a good example in a different sense. Because what they explain here is Portals Earliest levels are quick and easy. The latest one should take you longer to complete, as later levels incorporate more puzzles on the way to reach the chamber lock. So they just become more intricate over time. So it's not a case of you are leveling up, just the challenges are leveling up, in which case you have to think harder about it. But think about it this way: if the game started off with a very intricate chamber system where you have to put a pole there, move the object over, and then get it across there, and then have it drop, and then grab it just at the right time, and it's all like a mousetrap mechanic essentially, then where do you go from there? Do you go into like a higher level, or do you just maintain? If you just maintain, then there isn't that sense of progression. You don't feel like you are advancing any better. You feel like you're just being repetitive. Like it said up at the top, we create that new baseline. Essentially, we adjust very quickly. We need that next level, that next stage to excite us as human beings. The exception that proves the tool. It's important to understand there's a difference between a rule and a design tool. Rules are things you have to follow. Tools are things that work. The event structure is a design tool because it's reliably produces a certain experience. If you find other ways to create that experience, that's fine as well. So for example, there's a way to follow a positive with a positive or a negative with a negative. If the second positive is so much larger than the first, then that makes the first look irrelevant by comparison. You'll still feel a strong emotional impact. Your kid doing well on the SAT or SATs is a positive. If your kid then gets accepted to Harvard on a full scholarship, that's a whole other magnitude of wonderful. Like, yeah, I mean, that is like next level up. And oh god, I felt like my chair was going to fall back there. Yes, so unfortunately, this tactic isn't sustainable. You can't keep exponentially increasing positives or negatives for your whole game. You'll simply run out of room. This tactic should be used sparingly, just enough to surprise your players. If your players start taking your positive and negative event structure for granted, it can lessen each event impact in the process. So yeah, I mean, I can think of an example when I used to play Monster Hunter. So I was thinking of Monster Hunter World, and they had the Anjanath, which is like a mid-tier monster really, but they kind of had it around very early game as like the big bad, you know. So you'd just be doing some things, and then suddenly the Anjanath would burst out, and there was like this little almost like semi cutscene, I'll say, where it was like chasing me down like the corridor, and I just got away, and then it cuts to like another cutscene where it goes away again, and you go, oh my god, I'm glad I got away from it. And the Anjanath was built up to be this big scary thing, so it was worth it when you finally defeated it. But that was just mid-game really. It was it was early to mid-game. And then of course there's all the Elder Dragons and the real big bads later on. But instead of just slowly hemming up to that, the Anjanath created that little high and that sense of accomplishment, and then you went back to doing the farming and working away before you got the next high. So Monster Hunter structures that quite well as well. So wrapping up, a great event structure helps make a great game. Likewise, the coolest game on paper can collapse due to structural failures. If you've ever not drawn the right amount of lands in a game of Magic the Gathering, and thus not being able to get your escalating positives, you're experienced structural failure. If you've ever felt a game has stayed too easy for too long, you've experienced structural failure. If you've ever quit playing against a friend in a fighting game after being beaten for the 10th time in a row, you're probably trapped somewhere amidst the rubble. Always remember, your job isn't just to design a fun 30-second gameplay loop. Gameplay loops are very important to a game's experience, just like a good dialogue and description is important to a book. However, you need to ensure the moment-to-moment gameplay works to build a satisfying event structure for the player's complete experience. So yes, So with this, when they mentioned a gameplay loop, I like that use of wording. So a gameplay loop, you want to create that high and then that low and then repeat it again, but on greater stakes. Now, what they said, like, was it always remember your job isn't just to design a fun 30-second gameplay loop. The gameplay loops are very important to the game's experience, just like good dialogue and description is important to a book. So it's important, like I said, with a turn-based game, you can naturally have that high and low. Implementing it into a ramping up system is really only your task. And then from beyond that, it is more about focusing on the good gameplay. What I would say is still something, a video I've still been meaning to do, is the catch-up mechanics. I want to do a talk TCG on catch-up mechanics and analyzing different catch-up mechanics, and that's because I think that would work fantastic with this. When you're creating highs and lows, if you are constantly being beaten down, like it says in the fighting game, if I get beaten by my friend 10 games in a row, that isn't exciting for me. I want that catch-up mechanic. I want to be able to draw that card that can flip the game on its head and actually give me an advantage. Not just straight up, oh, this card means that I get to swap my life with your life. That's a bad example. But a card that means that I might be able to get something out that I had lost previously, so it's acting on something that I've already built, so there's a sense of achievement there, which also means that if I was picking it up late game, it's more effective than it is early game, which also leads to the ramping up, because if I've only got weak creatures in my graveyard and I can bring something back, then it's not as useful as later game when I've lost a really massive creature and it's in the graveyard, and then I can bring that back and oh my god, it's glorious, you know, it's got double-digit damage and it's just gonna go at you, you know. So it's about creating that, and I think this has been a fantastic little article on the game developer. There's quite a few more, but this one really stood out, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be analyzing any of the other ones from the game developer, but I've had a look through some of them. This one for me was the most exciting. But if you take game design seriously, if you take TCG design seriously, I would recommend having a look through these. Some of the knowledge you'll know, you might get a few little neat nuggets that's worth pursuing. I definitely recommend it. Like I said before, the link's in the description below. I'll see you next time. Thank you very much. Goodbye.